Well, hello, Viva El Birdos. JP Hill here, Jason Hill, as you all know me. And we are here today with Gabe and Blake and Heather, bringing you a little spring training preview. Pitchers and catchers reported yesterday, I think was the sort of official reporting day. And action is starting to trickle in from Jupiter, Florida. We had our first live bullpen session today, where Nolan Arenado took Adam Wainwright deep. And then I also saw that Dylan Carlson struck out looking on what looked like a ball to me. So our first controversial call of the season and our first home run of the season. But yeah, hey, how are you guys doing?
I'm doing great.
I'm ready.
You guys ready for spring? You guys like spring? I personally love spring training. I don't know if I'm the only one. It's completely non-competitive, but it's also so refreshing in the midst of winter. So
yes, exactly. I was just about to say the same thing. Like, it makes me happy to see warm weather somewhere and baseball somewhere, even if it's not here.
Well, a little bit of breaking news today that we're going to get to before we jump into our actual topic of spring training preview. And that is, first of all, that legendary Cardinal and legendary broadcaster and former Cardinal broadcaster as well, Tim McCarver, passed away this morning at the age of 81. And so condolences to the McCarver family. We were kind of talking about it beforehand. And I'll say one thing about it is that whenever he came over from the national Fox broadcast, I just it was a reminder to me just of how special the Cardinals are in the midst of the rest of the league, because here you had this national broadcaster, Saturday games. I don't know how many times I listened to Buck and McCarver on the Saturday broadcast. And here he was coming back over to, well, at that time, Fox Sports Midwest, and we got to listen to him every day. Now, I wasn't a huge fan as time went on, but here he was. I mean, it's a huge name in broadcasting, and he was calling our local team, and I just, with that, and Jack Buck and Joe Buck and Mike Shannon and Carey from the past, and Harry Carey, and now even Chip Carey, if you want to throw him up there, it's up to you guys about that one. But we've had such a long and storied tradition of broadcasters. I just thought, he's a big part of that.
This one kind of was more sad to me, I think, because he's sort of the last of that group of Cardinals that was alive, because Bob Gibson passed away, Lou Brock. Those are the main ones that come to mind that I remember. And he always had such great Gibson stories. Some of my favorite moments were actually from 2018, I believe, was the year when he and Gibson were in the broadcast booth together talking about stuff. I just thought that it meant something that he was like Gibson's favorite catcher, and so it was always cool to see the two of them together. And it's this one just felt a little bit sadder because it's kind of the closing of an era, and it's just a reminder that time goes on. The cruel hands of time, he always are ticking.
Yeah. This is off the cuff, so some of you might be able to help me here, but there was a stretch of time where the Cardinals basically went through something like 4 or 5 catchers in like 40 or 50 years. I mean, McCarver caught for a long time, but you had McCarver, and then you had Simmons, and then my order might get a little mixed up. I think Porter might have been before. Porter was definitely before Pagnazzi. No? Yeah. Porter and Pagnazzi.
There's somebody in between too, I think.
There was probably a few more, but as far as like your long term there, but it was pretty much just like this consecutive string of Gold Glove winners, and then Matheny and Yachty, and now Wilson Contreras. So who will be here for a while at least. So it's a pretty impressive run of catchers, and McCarver might not have been the best backstop among them, but he got for a long time and was, pretty great player. All right, second breaking news. This happened just right before we came on to the podcast, and that is that Ryan Helsley lost his arbitration case And so if you're counting at home, which I know you all are, that will mean that he will make, I think, 2.15 million this coming season. He was pushing for 3. And if you ask me, and I've made my opinions publicly known, so this won't be surprising to any of you. To me, he was 100% worth all of that $3 million. And I don't know what kind of arguments the Cardinals made to cause him to lose, probably innings or something like that. But yeah, we're going to save about 400,000 against what I had on previously published budgets, and they managed probably to say some not so nice things about their all-star, and I want to say it, but I'm not sure that I'm 100% committed. Best in a long time, relief pitcher, one of the best seasons we've seen from a relief pitcher in a long time, at least. What do you guys think about this whole arbitration process and Helsley losing?
I'll take I won't take the opposite view, but I'll defend it a little bit and say it wasn't completely based on 1 year. He wasn't that good in his first 2 years. He barely pitched. I assume that was the basis of their argument.
Right.
And also, I mean, I don't. I mean, that was pretty much it. If he was like that for his first 3 years, he'd be getting Josh Hader money.
Yeah.
There's no question. So I don't know. It's difficult. I feel like it's slightly different than the Corbin Burns thing, mostly because Burns is definitely more important to the Brewers than Helsley is to the Cardinals. No knock on Helsley. That's just where Burns is. And I feel like most of their argument was probably just look at his first 2 years. He hadn't figured it out, which I don't feel like he would take as much offense to because he'd probably be like, yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
I don't know.
If you didn't see it, just because this is all happening today, so actually probably will make the rounds a little bit before you guys see this on Saturday and this comes out. But Corbin Burns lost his case with the Brewers, and I guess the Brewers, like I was kind of saying, had some not so nice things to say about their, their elite caliber starting pitcher, and was pretty upset about it.
Yeah, they said it was the reason that they didn't make the playoffs or something like that.
I'm not sure about that one, but yeah, it's like, oh, okay, sure, all right.
Arbitration just strikes me as the dumbest thing ever. Like, you're literally going to go sit down with a player who was really good and then tell him why he doesn't deserve the money that he thinks he deserves and probably does deserve. And then, like, 2 years later, you're going to say, oh, hey, by the way, we actually do love you. Come resign with us. Like, I know these guys understand that it's a business and that with the way the current system is, that's how it works. But it doesn't really feel like the best way to get somebody to stay with you long term. So it feels like it's kind of a no-win situation for the team because either you push back and save money, you still piss them off, or you don't save money and you still piss them off. Yeah. So I don't really know how you're supposed to win that one.
Yeah, you're not. And I've said this before too and written about it that the Cardinals are a team, they don't set precedents. Like they're Bill DeWitt is one of the architects of this system. This is what he wants. And so they're not going to give the players anything that breaks the system or challenges the system or goes away from the system because I mean, it's not really true, but it's his system, right? So someone like Helsley, he's going to have to sit in a room, whether it's him or just the attorneys or whoever's involved in the agents, going to have to sit there and argue against, his all-star closer and make people mad. And that's kind of the way it's been. And I think Mo, at least recently, has tried everything he possibly can to avoid these kinds of hearings because he doesn't want these to happen. But I also don't blame Helsley, who has had injuries in the past. I don't blame him at all for going for as much money as he possibly can, because we might say, well, that $500,000 or even 900,000, might not matter that much when you're making 3. But if he has an injury this year or whatever, it's a huge difference for his life and his livelihood for the rest of his family. So I don't blame him. There's nothing the Cardinals can do, but it doesn't mean it's a good situation.
Yeah.
All right, enough of that. Let's leave arbitration behind. Oh, by the way, speaking of that, one more thing. The Cardinals do have one more arbitration case, a totally different kind of case, which is Genesis Cabrera. And as of when we recorded this, we didn't have the results of that one, but we probably will by the time you're watching it. So that's the guy who's trying to make as much money as he possibly can before he, might find himself, on the fringes of a roster. So
Wouldn't it be a weird optics if he won his case and Helsley lost his?
It
I
would.
mean,
It wouldn't shock me either because of playing time and innings and things like that.
but because it's 900,000 versus like 1.2 million or something.
I haven't looked at his. Yeah.
But yeah, that would just be weird if he. I mean, I would get it, but it'd still be weird if Genesis Cabrera, who had an objectively terrible year last year,
Yeah.
won his case to get more money, and Helsley lost his, who had one of the best seasons of any reliever in baseball.
Yeah. So that's our breaking news. Let's jump into what our topic was for today, which is a spring training preview. And let's just start by talking about that. It's spring. We're hearing the pop of mitts. We're seeing the crack of bats. What's your favorite part about spring, guys? What are you looking for?
Honestly, I like to see the young guys a lot. Like even some of the guys who are just completely off the radar. Like give me Tommy Parsons throwing a scoreless inning at the beginning of March, and I'll just eat it up. And so I'm super excited to see those guys play. But then also just seeing if we can kind of identify any changes that some of the other players are making. So like if a pitcher's added a pitch, I know Jordan Montgomery actually. There was an article today about him potentially adding a slider back, even though he hasn't thrown it for like 2 or 3 years, although he has had a cutter. So there can be similar. So like seeing something like that, or seeing somebody adjust his pitch mix, or seeing if Nolan Gorman has a swing change that can help him get to that high fastball. Like those are the kinds of things that I like to look for in the spring.
Yeah. Speaking of that, have you looked at Montgomery's slider data in the past? This is kind of putting you on the spot, but I was just curious, like what the data said about that pitch, and I realize things can change. You know, if the old data was worth coming back to, or if there's been some sort of mechanical change they've identified that they feel like they can get more out of it than they used to in the past.
Yeah, I looked at it a little bit. I don't remember what the results were. Honestly, it was it was pretty clear, like his fourth or fifth pitch or whatever it was. Like it was really the last one in his arsenal. And it didn't have a ton of sweep to it. So it was more of kind of that downward plane action. And then he dropped it and kind of or turned it into a cutter, which moved similarly and also didn't have a lot of cut to it. So I wonder if by bringing it back, they're going to try to add a little bit of sweep to that to help it play off his sinker, which is what they're trying to have him throw more.
Yeah. Gabe, you were about to say.
Well, what I was about to say is I'm not that interested in all the regulars because I feel like that's not going to lead you to anywhere healthy for the most part. Like if a starter sucks, remember Miles Michaelis' first couple of starts in his first time ever as a Cardinal were terrible, and everybody panicked about the signing, and then he ended up having a really good year. So none of the starters, none of the regulars, but I am interested in what the prospects do, like Walker, Libertor, Connor Thomas. I'm curious how his cutter plays in spring training for sure, but I'm mostly interested in seeing people not get injured.
Yeah, right. I thought about throwing that in. We've got, by the way, this is an organized podcast. That's sarcasm, but I thought about throwing that in there as our end of the end of the podcast item is taking bets on which arm goes down first. But I just thought that would be too depressing.
I'm not
we won't talk about that. Yeah.
Say, like, don't want to jinx it. Don't want to reverse jinx, triple reverse jinx.
Not a bet. Everybody wants to win.
Yeah. Right. What about you, Heather?
Well, I was gonna say was what Gabe said about not interested in watching the regulars. You probably won't get to see very much of them because they're all going to be in the World Baseball Classic, which is kind of exciting. I'm excited to try to be able to watch that and then it not be available where I'm at or whatever. Have to fight with MLB TV over that. I'm excited for that. But yeah, I really want to see Jordan Walker. I was able to go to winter warm up and listen in on his press conference and like see him up close, not playing or anything, but just as a person. And he is a very exciting person. He has like this like energy about him that you can like see coming off of him, this like charisma, and just he just seems like a very interesting, fun person that I really want to succeed because I want him to be everyone's favorite player. He just has that kind of like, and it would just be so good for the Cardinals, I think, to have a player like that as a high or like a high performing player. Because he's young, exciting. And there's Mason Wynn. I didn't get to see Mason Wynn. I had to leave. but I did get to see Tink Hence, and he's also another young, exciting player. He hasn't had a lot of innings, so it'll be fun to watch him pitch to some higher competition. That's what I'm excited about. I also just like spring. I like seeing the green grass when it's kind of like gloomy outside where we are. I like just being able to turn on a baseball game during the day and just like work and do my work and stuff. So that's what I'm looking forward to. I also like all the storylines, like who's in the best shape of their life. Who got a new pitch, who's been working on their swing, Paul DeYoung. That's that's the big one. So that's I like all that stuff. It's just like a rebirth. Like not to get like too. There's so much potential and so much possibility, and it's just very exciting for someone, especially when you're like an optimist like me. So
yeah. I don't really love this, but I'll participate in it as much as anyone. But I love the overreacting to spring training and like the making like whole points out of like the smallest little bits of data. Like today, I talked about this a few minutes ago, that first sort of live bullpen, and Dylan Carlson was in it, and I swear Carlson looks thicker. He looked bigger. Now, do I have any basis of that? Nope. Was he wearing clothing or a uniform, anything like what he did last year with the major? Nope. But he looked more cut, more, especially up here around the arms. So now I firmly believe that Carlson's going to hit 50 home runs this season. So, mark
he's
that one
beefy
down.
now. I'm trying to remember who it was where someone said they looked like someone in the press said they looked like they lost weight, and their response was, "No, I just got bigger pants." It feels like a Lance Berkman thing. I don't know if that was who it was. He's like, I just got bigger clothes.
I was going to say, if you were taking bets on who was going to get the first best shape of his life, I believe Nolan Gorman is the winner.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I heard that. I read that today.
I don't think those exact terms were used, but yeah, they basically portrayed him as coming in best shape of his life, basically. So that's exciting, at least. Yes.
He's already in pretty good shape, I feel like, right? Or am I thinking of someone else? Maybe not. Maybe I'm thinking of Brendan Donovan. Yeah. Maybe that's what I'm thinking of. He just has a lot of power, so I thought he was already in shape.
Yeah, he probably was. I don't know.
Yeah.
And I can't remember what he looks like.
Yeah. Well, I will say, like you mentioned about Walker, having followed Walker since the moment he was drafted, I got to write the draft article about Jordan Walker. I just want to brag about that one for a second.
Yes.
Really had no idea what I was talking about, but I wrote the article anyway.
Hey, that's all that matters.
It happened to be my day, so I was in the chair. He, I mean, talk about an impressive figure. He looks. I mean, he has bulked up, and I wouldn't say that he had a thin frame when he drafted. I don't mean that. I mean, he was pretty, big back then, but that teenage frame has become a man's frame, and he has the kind of body that you would believe it when he hits home runs the opposite way to the upper deck. Speaking of that, Moises Gomez looks amazing as well.
I saw that picture on Twitter. That was insane.
Yeah, he's jacked. No doubt about that. But yeah, if you haven't seen, those of you who might not have seen Moises Gomez play, first of all, shame on you. Go look and watch the highlights of his How many home runs did he hit last year in the minors total? 35, something like that?
I think it was 39.
39.
Wow.
Yeah, 39. Yeah. Struck out 39 times a night too. But
39 times a night. I thought you were going to say 39 times. I was like, wow, that's incredible. Per night. Oh my.
Yeah. A little bit of boomer bust with him, but he is worth watching, and it'll be fun to watch him. You mentioned Heather, and then Gabe, you mentioned watching the young kids. We're going to get a lot of these kids this spring because of the World Baseball Classic. Let's take this from two perspectives. Let's take it first from the perspective of the established players. The Cardinals have as many or more established players going to the WBC as any other team. I saw one funny quote. It was that picture of Will Smith from The Fresh Prince just standing there in the empty room, and it was just like Dylan Carlson's like, where is everybody? He's gonna be like the only one.
Exactly where you're going with that before.
yeah, the only one left. But does that worry you that these guys are jumping into pretty intense competition so early in spring?
I don't think so. They're most of these guys are veterans, so they know what they're doing. I think some of them have even been in the WBC before. So
Yeah, Arenado.
is it usually
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Is it usually in the spring?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, it's just that the year is off because of COVID. Okay, I couldn't remember. Yeah. So I think they'll be fine. They know what to expect. There are some younger players, but for them, they've been playing baseball this whole time, basically. So I think it'll be okay. I actually think it might be a benefit in a way because we will get to see more reps from some of the younger players, and then the more established players, as long as they don't, knock on wood, as long as they don't hurt themselves, we'll get some good competitive reps and maybe be really tuned up by the time the season starts. That's what I kind of think. I think it'll be a good thing, hopefully.
I'm not really worried about the hitters because I feel like you're still like, I mean, it's the same basic thing. And, but I feel like pitching, to go from spring training, you're gradually building yourself up to the regular season. And all of a sudden on March 9th, you have to suddenly pitch in some high leverage games.
Yeah.
Screw up their whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a little worried about that for Wainwright, although if anybody's more understanding of what their arm needs and has, probably Wainwright. And Michaelis, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I am worried about that, to go straight from, because I don't.
It's only a few weeks before the season starts, though, right? The season starts at the end
It's
of March.
more. It's more
right?
that like it's like by March 9th, they would be pitching like 3 or 4 innings, probably, right? They wouldn't be like full scale, and they gotta get to full
Mm-hmm.
blown a lot faster. I don't know if they'll be expected to pitch 6 innings in the WBC. I certainly hope not. But
Yeah, I doubt it.
and I don't know if Wainwright's, is he in the bullpen or starting in there?
I haven't looked about that. Yeah, I would assume it will be a combination because they're going to try to squeeze as many innings out of, or spread the innings out as much as possible.
Yeah, okay.
Whoever the manager
would
is.
make it better.
Yeah,
But yeah,
but still,
that'd be my main concern, is just that it would screw up, because they have their own system for how to get ready for the regular season, and they got to suddenly be ready way earlier than they normally are. And not only that, it's going to be high leverage, basically, especially if you're invested in the team winning, which I think they all definitely are. So I don't know. That's what I'm worried about with pitching. Not worried about the hitters at all, because I don't know if it's a huge change to suddenly be geared up as a hitter as it is pitching.
Yeah, I'm with Gabe. I think it might be. I think the World Baseball Classic starts like March 7th, I think. So seeing if guys are going to be throwing 6, 7 inning starts by March 7th would be a little concerning to me. So I almost wonder if they're going to have some piggyback starts going early, where they'll have like 3 innings by one guy and then, like 3 innings by Waino and then followed by 3 innings of Michaelis or something like that. Just because I do think it will be tough for them to build up that quickly. But just as a side note too, and not to get us sidetracked, but like I look at a guy like Wilfredo Pereira, who's a prospect pitched in high A last year. He's playing for Panama, but he threw 118 innings last year and then played a full winter ball season in Panama, then pitched in the Caribbean Series, and is now going to go pitch in the World Baseball Classic. And I'm like, some of these guys haven't even had an off season. I wonder how that's if they're going to wear down some of these prospects, if they're going to wear down during the season this year.
Yeah, and we've heard that, right? We heard it from Alec Burleson. We heard it a little bit from Graceffo. That they're not used to playing this much, and it definitely wears on them. I'm kind of like exactly like you, Gabe. Like if I'm most worried about anyone, it's Mikolas. I was concerned with Mikolas at the end of last season when he was pushing 180 to 200 innings after only a handful of innings over the years before that, and to know that he's going to have to change some of his routine and potentially get thrown into the fire a little early. And it's weird things that probably won't happen, but could, like, is Mikolas going to have to come in the middle of an inning at something like that in a competitive situation? Or, it's those kind of oddities that make me a little nervous for him, but it's still fun. So you can't, he could get hurt on a backfield at spring training just as easily. So
yeah, there's been people that hurt themselves. What was that, on a drone, or someone cut themselves with a knife or something?
Hunting knife,
or in a 4-wheeler accident, or all these various things.
Yeah, I think Devin Williams punched a wall.
Yeah. Or yes, yeah. So you can't.
My word would be
Yeah.
less injury while pitching in the World Baseball Classic and more long-term ramifications later on in the year, personally.
Mhm.
But yeah.
It kind of going, like I said, from the other angle then is this reality that the Cardinals have these spring training games without, a good portion of their regulars, which means more innings and more at bats for these young players. And I guess you could kind of look at it two ways. Well, one is, Ollie Marmol and the rest of the staff are going to get a really good look at guys who might be on the fringes of the roster, like Alec Burleson and can't remember, is Yepes going? No, Yepes is still going to be with the club, right? Donovan, I know, is in the WBC, I think. Well,
I
now I'm second guessing myself about those two.
I wrote an article.
Yeah,
for it.
Wrote an article. Can't remember what I wrote. Yeah. But anyway, there's going to be some that are. I know Nupar's going, but a real opportunity for guys like Moses Gomez and Carlson to some extent, Jordan Walker, Mason Wynn to get some real experience against big leaguers that they probably wouldn't get, in a different environment. Which I think there's no way that's bad, right? That's all good.
I have the list if you want to hear it.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, Genesis Cabrera, Giovanni Gallegos, Miles Michaelis, Andre Palante, Jojo Romero, Adam Wainwright, Guillermo Zuniga, Ivan Herrera, Nolan Arenado, Tommy Edman, Paul Goldschmidt, Lars Newbar, and Tyler O'Neill, plus 6 minor leaguers as well. Do you want those names or no?
Sure.
Yeah.
I was like,
2 players from Great Britain are there that are in our minor league system.
Are there any notable minor leaguers? You said Herrera. I guess that's
Herrera, but I guess he's already made a major league debut. So
LJ Jones, who I guess he's not really notable, but he was in that 2020 draft. Koperniak, who could become something.
Yeah.
Like I said, Mercado, Rofredo, which you mentioned, and then Menlinger, who's probably just depth.
Okay.
So not really, but kind of.
Could be.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is a weird question, but just thinking about what Burleson said when we interviewed him, with this extra time for these guys in spring, extra competition, would you be more worried about some of them wearing down as the season went on, or is that an exaggerated fear? Probably something that's not even going to come into play, right?
I wouldn't be worried about that because I think they still have those guys throwing innings, just not like in games that are in the minor leagues or whatever. And instead they'll get to face big league competition, I guess. But I still think they have them throw, right? In the spring, in the minor league spring.
Yeah. And I imagine it'll just mean that they'll just shift through some guys who are lower in the system now, since there's just more room for them.
Yeah, that's probably true. Yeah, it'll probably be about the same level of work, just maybe a little different level of competition that they might face just because of the availability of innings and at bats. Okay, so speaking of that, all of this time available for some of these guys that are, competing for roster spots or on the fringe of roster spots, what are some key competitions that you guys are looking at, and some sort of critical, places where someone could surprise?
I mean, I really think there's probably 2 spots, and obviously it's Jordan Walker and the outfield, and we can leave that one for later for a minute, and then it's the bullpen too. Because I'm planning my next article for Sunday on writing about the bullpen and specifically the right-handed options, since I already covered the left-handed options, and there's like a million options for what's probably going to be 6 spots, and I mean 4 of those spots are going to be Gallegos, Helsley, Hicks, and Stratton. So does that mean like Dakota Hudson? I've seen articles talking about, is Dakota Hudson going to be in the rotation, and I think, is Dakota Hudson going to be on the roster?
Yeah,
that's a question. And guys like Jake Woodford, is he going to be on the roster, or is he going to be just going back down up or the Memphis shuttle again this year? So I think that is kind of the biggest competition and the area where there's probably the most room for surprise, with at least with those last 2 spots.
Yeah, because even a guy you didn't mention is on a major league contract is Drew Verhagen. Like, so if you add him in, you really only have like 1, maybe 2 if you start playing with the lefties.
Yeah.
spots for a righty, in the bullpen that's not basically already locked into place.
Yeah.
And if it's anything like what they've done in the past, if you're guaranteed a spot because of your contract, they're going to get something out of you until they prove that they can't, right? And so like Aaron, that's how Aaron Brooks made the roster last year. It's like, hey, we're going to get something out of you until you prove that we can't. Well, I thought he'd already proven that whenever he got by the end of spring, but whatever. So he didn't make it. They shipped him out, and then they started dipping down into their optionable minor league system. So.
Yeah. And I mean, that's the thing too. Verhagen is out of options. At
Yeah,
least
right.
So, I mean, I guess if you put him on waivers, who's going to claim a guy who's terrible last year and has like a $5 million contract, but he could probably pass through and get to AAA, but that's still a consideration.
It is. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Would say none. I feel like the roster's set almost. I mean, the bullpen, I think the second lefty spot is up for grabs to some extent. I feel like that's about it if you assume that Verhagen's going to make the roster. And I feel like they're going to have Dakota Hudson make the roster, if I'm being honest, because that's not really their style to send somebody like him down to the minors. And I don't think he's going to make the rotation. So unless somebody gets hurt, then they'll slot into the fifth spot. But I think Alec Burleson's going to make the team. I think Nolan Gorman's going to make the team. I think DeYoung's going to make the team. I don't know that there's anywhere, and I don't think Jordan Walker's going to make the team either. So I don't really know that there is a competition to be won per se, unless they are seriously considering Walker to start, and then to have to make one of Nootbaar, O'Neill, and Carlson a bench player, which I don't see them doing personally.
Let's talk about that right-handed thing though, because I think maybe there's more here than we would say, because you've got Helsley, you've got Gallegos. My brain stopped working completely. Did you see it? Those of you that are watching on YouTube, did you see the moment when my brain just stopped working? So Hicks, that's okay. Helsley, Hicks, Gallegos. There's three. And then you had a fourth.
Chris Stratton.
Oh, Stratton.
Okay. Stratton. Okay. So then let me present to you Andre Palante. There's five, right? Unless they want Palante to start. So there's your five, and then you've got Verhagen. So there's six.
Can't forget about the five guy either. I don't know.
Yeah, Wilkin Rodriguez. And if you want to look at
Wilkin Rodriguez. So I mean, at some point you got to say, okay, there's either no lefties or there's competition. There's a cut. Or a couple cuts.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like Wilkin Rodriguez has to be on the roster. Verhagen's out of options. Do they keep both of them? But then what happens to Palante?
Yeah, Palante goes down. Yeah.
Hudson. And
I was looking at that and I was thinking they got to send Palante and Hudson down if nobody gets injured, which never happens. But
right, these things usually sort themselves out. Yeah. But it's nice to think about it.
Yeah. But like Bruno, we don't talk about spring training injuries.
Right. Like Bruno.
Thanks for getting that, Heather. I appreciate that. So
I got it. I was right there.
Yeah. So I mean, I it's like, for me, I do not envision a scenario, a possibility, regardless of the way the roster looks, where Andre Palante isn't on the major league team.
Really?
Based on, yeah, I mean, well, unless they want him. I mean, the only thing that I could imagine is either, well, one, he like really struggles in the spring, which is a possibility, or there's some injury that forces him in. But considering the way that they used him and everything last year, it just seems like he's a roster lock, but yet we're struggling to find space for him because of guys with established contracts.
The only reason I would hesitate is because maybe they have him geared up for the 2024 rotation, and it'd be very difficult for him to throw over 100 innings if he's not sent to AAA to get some innings, at least to begin the year. And then next year, like, you could even match 100 innings, just have him be in the rotation in AAA for the first 2 months or something, and then call him up. And at that point, he'd probably get the 100 innings just being in the bullpen in the multi-inning role. I don't know. That's the main argument I would say why he might get sent down, is because they want him in the rotation next year because they got 4 spots. So,
yeah.
Well, that just makes sense, Kate. That just makes all kinds of sense. But I would have done that last year. And they clearly didn't. So.
Like, I'm kind of with Gabe, because I mean, we saw Palante was up the whole year, if I'm not mistaken. And it feels weird that they would like him so much to bring him up straight from AA, pitch him the entire year in the majors, and then send him back down. But I also just think, like, the Cardinals have acquired so much pitching depth, which feels
Yeah.
weird after the last couple of years. And generally, teams that get a lot of pitching depth don't just give it away for free. So I
No.
don't think we're going to let a guy like Wilkin Rodriguez just go back to the Yankees without getting run in the majors. So honestly, I would not be shocked to see like Rodriguez and or Verhagen in the majors at least for a month. And then if they struggle after a month, then they're gone and Palante comes back up.
Yeah. And it might be an opportunity. First of all, let me just say, I do not think they're going to do this, right? So let me clarify. I don't think they're going to do this, but it could be a possibility where they use all of this depth. And I don't really mean it this way, but to kind of correct some of their mistakes in the way that they promoted players. And what I mean by that is like at this point, based on what we saw last year, Zach Thompson, Andre Palante, they're on a reliever track. And say Matthew Liberatore is still on a starter track. But if you look at their performance, like I wouldn't be all that disappointed if they shifted those around and gave Liberatore, for example, who I mean, like I said, on a starter's track through this point, the opportunity to maybe show what he can do with a higher velocity fastball out of the bullpen, whereas Zach Thompson got more of a chance to see what he could do as a starter. Based on what we saw from him last year, I have probably a little bit more confidence in Thompson in the rotation at this point than I do in Liberatore in the rotation. And I think that I've got more confidence in Andre Palante in the rotation than either of those two, although it's really close, really fine. So it could be an opportunity with all of this depth, some of it questionable, some of it, not necessarily guys you want to see, but you also don't want to lose them. For Palante, Thompson, to stay in the rotation, Woodford maybe to stay in the rotation or maybe try out as a bullpen. Hudson staying in the rotation, and then a guy like Graceffo not even being considered for a role at all because they want to lock him into a bullpen spot. Whereas in previous years, I mean, people have already been talking about it. They've been so aggressive in promoting some of these pitchers to bullpen spots. You would almost halfway expect someone like Graceffo to get some real time in the bullpen, which I think would be a poor decision.
I would push back on thinking Thompson is a better starter than Liberatore, but that's just because he was a two-pitch pitcher in the majors. And honestly, his bullpen stats weren't that good.
Yeah, it's true. The Thompson that I watched looks better to me than the Thompson that I've seen on paper. So there's a little bit of bias that I'm coming into it. Like I realize that what I saw from Thompson doesn't match what I felt like his stats should be. So which one's real? Well, you know me, I tend to default to the stats. So I'm trying to sort of retrofit Thompson into that. Like the K rate wasn't what it should be, and it wasn't what I expected to be. And so he's going to have to show some more of that before he could live up to my mental expectations for him, in the bullpen or in the rotation. Not that they're even that high. I'm still talking back end guy, 3, 4, 5 starter, but he looked good at times. He just looked good, even if the results aren't quite there on paper.
Now, having said that, I would send him back to AAA to stay in the rotation because I want to keep all the balls in the air for the 2024 rotation if possible. And as we've been saying, they got so much depth in the bullpen. Well, maybe not good depth if Verhagen's there, but they do have a lot of depth, and they've got their strategy this offseason suggests to me they plan to put Thompson in the AAA rotation because they've compiled 3 lefties who are currently on the outside looking in. If you consider Thompson on the MLB, which is the Anthony guy we got from KC, JoJo and Packy Naughton, those 3.
Yeah, and
I feel like one of those 3 could easily make the roster as a second lefty. Or
what's that guy's name again?
Misovic.
Oh yeah, right. Good luck.
Yeah,
good job, Blake. I'm not going to say it. Yeah, he looked pretty decent. Like he's JoJo or Packy levels are better. So yeah.
Yeah, and I'm with Gabe too. I think honestly, I would put Thompson back in the AAA rotation. I would probably put Palante back in the AAA rotation. Even though I like Palante better, I think he's also going to be better as a starter long term. So I would love to see both of those two go go back. I've always been of the mind that like keep them in the rotation until they prove they shouldn't be a starter. And I don't think either of them have proven that they shouldn't be a starter. And with open spots next year, I'd rather keep them as options instead of just pigeonholing them into that 1 inning role now, especially with how much depth the Cardinals have built up.
So let me ask you guys this then. Go ahead, Heather. Yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say they have the depth, it sounds like, to where, because in the past it's almost been a necessity, I feel like, that they've brought in some of these potential starters to be relievers because they just weren't going to spend the money and I don't blame them on a free agent reliever, because in the past when they've done that, that's usually not worked. And and so I think it makes sense to bring in some of your younger players to relieve. But now that they have, all this relief depth, they have some options now where they don't necessarily need to have some of those young starters in there.
Yeah. Would you guys, considering all of this, what we said, would you guys prefer to leave Zach Thompson in the bullpen and elevate someone like Connor Thomas, right, to the I'm sorry. Let me start over. I said that wrong. Leave Zach Thompson in the AAA rotation. Mm-hmm. You guys saw when my brain stopped. It hasn't turned back on yet. And then elevate someone like Connor Thomas to the major league bullpen. Does it make sense? Because you would think in the pecking order that Thompson would be here, Connor Thomas would be here, so they would elevate up, sort of by the pecking order. But I could see a scenario like in my mind where Connor Thomas, best case scenario for him is quality major league reliever, swing starter at best. Whereas Zach Thompson has a little bit higher of probably a floor and ceiling in the rotation and in the bullpen. So see what he can do in the rotation, stretch him out, and see what Connor Thomas can do in the bullpen against major leaguers. Because honestly, besides the AFL, and I know I interviewed Connor Thomas and I love Connor Thomas, his stuff isn't quite what I would expect from, a dominant or even necessarily a high quality major league pitcher, period, no matter what his role is.
I would not. I would like to see at least half a season of Connor Thomas starting in AAA just to see how much those AFL stats transfer over. Because if they do it all, then he looks like a strong option to take one of the spots next year, honestly. Because he was like very dominant in a very hitter league.
Yeah.
And you got to pay attention to that a little bit, I think. And it's worth exploring at the very least, even if you're not, into his ultimate future. I don't think there's any real downside to having him be in the rotation in AAA for at least 3 months or so, just to see how, has he figured something new out? Because we get surprise average or better major leaguers out of what people think are not much prospects all the time.
Yeah. I think Connor Thomas is probably a major leaguer at some point, but it's like, so if your choice, I guess what I'm saying is if your choice is stretching Thompson out or stretching Palante out or seeing what Connor Thomas can do, in the major leagues, I might be more inclined to give a Connor Thomas, a Jake Walsh, a Freddie Pacheco. I might even give some of those guys time, even though they haven't really earned it, before I start bumping some of these potential starters out of starting roles back into the major league bullpen. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I would keep Thomas down and just bring up Misevic or Naughton or Jojo Romero, or if you need a righty, then Jake Walsh or like a Freddie Pacheco, and just because those guys are relievers. I don't want to turn a starter into a reliever this early when we already have guys who have already had AAA success in the bullpen sitting there.
Yeah. Let's jump to the offensive side, because I think there's a competition that we haven't mentioned, but is very significant for roster ramifications on the offensive side. And that's this sort of like inner dynamic between, and they don't all play the same position, so it's not like a direct competition, but between these lefty and righty DH, outfield kind of guys. So you've got Alec Burleson, Juan Yepez, and Nolan Gorman. And I don't think all three of them can leave Jupiter with the club unless there's an injury to someone else. I'd have to go through and count. But if Paul DeYoung makes it as the backup shortstop and, everything else kind of stays healthy, I think one of those guys probably has to go south. Am I right in that, or is my math way off?
Well, do you think Paul DeYoung will make the roster as the backup shortstop? 'Cause
I'm
he
about
was-
99% convinced. There's no one else that
He plays
is really likely to compete with him. They've got a 4A kind of guy. Any of you guys know his name off the top of your heads?
Robinson or the Jose Fermin guy.
Yeah, no, yeah, Fermin. That's who I was thinking of. Yeah, because it's Jose Fermin, who I don't think has
No,
any time in the majors. And then there's Kramer Robertson. So
Mhm.
Fermin's not really much of a shortstop either, at least how the Guardians were using him. He started playing only second and third, I believe, in his last year there in the minors.
yeah,
What did they do last season? They had Edmund at shortstop, and then when Paul DeYoung was down in the minors, who was
Donovan.
the backup? Was it Donovan?
Donovan.
Yeah.
You don't think they would go forward doing that? I'm not being
I guess
I'm
they
not
could.
denying it. I'm just asking questions to
No.
to ask them, not to discuss them.
If you want to give him more starts, that's one way to do it, I guess.
Yeah, I hadn't really thought of it that way, actually, Heather. I had assumed that they were going to want a legit backup shortstop.
No,
but
I kind
did
of agree with you.
trade-
Yeah.
Yeah, they did trade Edmundo Sosa, and for a while there, they were relying on. I wonder how much time it was that Sosa wasn't there, and Donovan was the only backup before they brought DeYoung up. I don't think it was as long as it feels because Sosa was traded All-Star break, something like that, right?
I forgot about that
I
completely.
think they traded Sosa, called up DeYoung right away, didn't they?
Was it consecutive, or was there some time there where there was no backup? I think it might have been closer than we think, than I'm remembering.
Yeah, I forgot why Donovan played shortstop. I think they just were not trusting of Sosa at the time.
Yeah,
I think that's why Donovan played shortstop a little bit. But
Yeah.
yeah, Sosa was actually the answer, I guess, wasn't he?
yeah. So I guess that is another possibility, right? So I guess the competition comes down to one man out, unless my math is way off, between Burleson, Gorman, DeYoung, and Yepez.
So I think your math is a little bit off. I think for 13 position players, they could keep all of them.
Can they?
Yeah. So if we have two catchers, Contreras and Kisner, and then you have Arenado, Donovan, Goldie, and Edmund gives us 6, and then Gorman and DeYoung on the bench gives us 8, and then O'Neill, Carlson, Nootbaar, Yepez, and Burleson gives us 13.
So they can all make it.
So they could, but then the question is, do you want to leave Burleson sitting on the bench? Do you want to leave Gorman sitting on the bench? And how do you get them all playing time when Donovan, Gorman, and Burleson are all lefties? Because you're only going to play 2 out of the 3 against a right-handed pitcher, unless you want to play Donovan at like short or third or something.
Right. The flip side, though, to that question is there literally anyone else that they could bring up? I mean, because who else is even an option that could break with the club that they wouldn't have to either burn an option or start their clock? I mean, that's the one thing this team lacks. They've got a full roster, but Moises Gomez would be an option. So there's one. But that's you're getting down into
Like if
Jose
they want to
Fermin.
trust their fielder as a 4th outfielder, because they could bring up Mercado, which is
Mercado.
not option, but it's
Yeah.
DFA somebody, but yeah.
yeah.
But I mean, that's a huge drop off between Alec Burleson and Nolan Gorman to Oscar Mercado and Jose Fermin and Moises Gomez. Gomez probably has the best chance of any of those guys, but it's just he's just there as he's going to be up with the club this year and provide some significant at bats, but no one's counting on him for anything.
It's kind of tough for him to do it too, because like with the other guys, they figure out a way to play him a little bit. With Gomez, I feel like he just get buried.
Yeah,
because it would not be a priority.
Just wouldn't play.
No.
Yeah. It's tough for a guy who strikes out as much as he does to play like once a week or whatever he would do.
Yeah, if he's not going to have the rhythm, he's just going to keep striking out.
Yeah.
Right.
But I will say,
it seems like someone that we want to play and someone the club is going to want to play every day. Maybe 2 someones are gonna find themselves in at best a platoon situation and probably a 26-man bench situation.
Well, if you limited Burleson to 4th outfielder and you cycled through it a little bit, that takes care of one issue maybe, and then you platoon Yepez and Gorman at DH, and you give Gorman some starts at second. I don't know. It's Marmol has his work cut out for him with playing all these guys. I'll say that. But
Yeah.
There is a DH too.
right, but
Yeah.
there's 3 guys for just the DH basically.
Right. But like, not that it would be easy, but there's like 3 positions to cycle through 3 different guys.
Yeah.
So you could do some platooning and
Yeah, because there are
stuff.
some real platoon options in the outfield. I mean, it would be really good for them to give Carlson at least, every other, day against a righty off. It would move Newt to center field, but I'd like to see Newt Barr get some more time in center field, to be honest. He didn't have a whole lot of experience there, but all the athletic stats point to him being able to handle it on an acceptable level. Same with Carlson, except Carlson has legitimate time there throughout his career.
And you want to give O'Neill regular rest because of all of his injury problems, I'd say.
Yeah,
That's
and you've got some good reasons to platoon. Not I don't mean strict platoons, but just if you're going to give O'Neill some time off against a hard righty and throw Burleson in there, that's a good decision. It's not a bad decision at all.
Yeah, and given the injury potential of some of this group, injuries could make this not as much of a problem as we're imagining too.
Yeah.
It usually finds a way.
Yeah.
It could be
It
interesting.
could be a situation where all these guys that we're talking about get between 350 and 500 at bats, and no one gets any more than that, which is probably ideal for all of them.
Yeah, and then somebody ends up getting traded at some point, maybe at the deadline or over the offseason because we need a starter.
Or because Walker is
yeah, that too. Oh shit.
Yeah.
That's the elephant in the room, isn't it?
Okay, so let's the elephant is in and he's loud and huge. So does Walker make this club? What do you guys think? Does he have a real chance? Does he have a real chance to make this club?
I think they want to give him more time in the outfield.
I don't think he has a real shot, but
no.
If he bats like 400 and hits 10 homers, I mean, I don't know if they're going to be like, oh, well, you're not ready. So, but it's still spring training stats. We know how well Paul DeYoung did training last year.
I think he might be ready at the plate, but I wouldn't fault them if they wanted to give him more time in the outfield.
Yeah, I don't really think he has a real shot either. Like, obviously, if he hits 410 home runs, like maybe, but I mean, and I could be way off base here, but we saw a little bit last year when Gorman was killing the ball. Everybody wanted Gorman to come up, and then they brought up Donovan about a month early, and then brought Gorman up behind him, the higher touted prospect. I wonder if they're going to try to do a similar thing and not just banish Burleson off the roster, essentially, which is what would happen if they bring up Walker. Like, if they wait on Walker, let him get his defense better in AAA and let Burleson have an actual chance to face major league pitching and prove that he can hit it before calling him up. That is kind of what I envision them doing. And then there's Moises Gomez to think about, but I don't think they're really like, I don't know how much of a chance he's going to get if Walker's ready.
Yeah. I think it's kind of, an opportunity too. And we've seen this in the past a little bit with a few guys, but they at some point something's going to have to give. One of these guys is probably going to have to be traded or something's going to have to happen. And I think it would be almost a mistake not to give like someone like Alec Burleson some significant time, some significant looks, because he could, I mean, I'm not going to say that he could go Lars Nootbaar, on a team, but he really could. I mean, his underlying metrics are strong. He doesn't quite have that power or that athleticism, but you give him a month, let people get a good look at him and see what he's doing, and then you've got a real asset that you could move or potentially shift some other guys around. And if they just go straight to Walker, they're never going to be able to show what they have in some of these other players, unless they choose to get rid of spare parts and make another Harrison Bader like trade, where it's O'Neill this time going, or O'Neill's really the only one that fits. So.
And I'll make another point. I think that Springfield's park is maybe making Jordan Walker's stats look a little better than they are, because not that he has a 128 weighted runs created plus, which is very strong.
Mm-hmm.
Not necessarily skip AAA strong, though, is my only argument, especially at his age. And like for instance, Daniel Descalso had a higher isolated power than Jordan Walker did at AA. I don't know if, but so he didn't have as much power as you think he would have given his potential at such a power heavy park. That'd be my other point, basically, is that his basic stats look a lot better than they maybe would if he played at Palm Beach or something.
Yeah. And I think part of that too is like I think the raw power is there. I think the game power plays down a little bit because he hits too many ground balls. And that could be something for him to work on in AAA while he's getting better at playing the outfield, is just learning how to loft the ball more and become that true power hitter that he can be.
Yeah. It's almost like, and Blake said it better than I'm going to, but for that first, what would you say, Blake, like 3 weeks to a month, maybe, that he was a surviving hitter, and he still looked good. I mean, like his stats were still good, but the power wasn't there. And then it, like, kicked in. And I almost wonder if the AFL might be a little bit better indication of what he is, because I mean, he was smoking the ball in the AFL too. And that would probably be, it's not necessarily the finishing school that it used to be with 3A and 4A talents on the verge of the majors, but there's a lot of good arms in the AFL too. And it's at least AA to AAA caliber. So seeing him continue that after a good finish to the season in AA is encouraging. But yeah, there's absolutely no reason why he wouldn't benefit from more time, in AAA. And I think the outfield defense is a big part of it. He really doesn't have that many innings in the outfield. And this is a team with this pitching staff. It needs to have quality defense out there. And Nootbaar and Carlson and, O'Neill can provide that. And Walker, I mean, the arm's there, but it's a lot to throw on him when perhaps it might be better to give some of the guys a look for a little while. Plus, frankly, at this age, you just can't expect Walker to show up in the majors and be Albert Pujols. That just, it only happens once or twice a generation,
Albert Pujols.
Yeah, with Albert Pujols. I don't even mean this as a slight. I think people would be really disappointed, but like, I think the way that baseball typically goes, if you gave Walker and Burleson and O'Neill and Carlson and Nootbaar the same number of bats in the majors, Walker probably wouldn't be ahead of any of them in offensive performance, at least by WRC plus. And that wouldn't be, not to say that would be bad. It's just he's that young and he doesn't have the experience. And we remember how long it took Carlson and other guys like that to kind of get their feet wet facing major league changeups for the first time. He's never seen one of those. And it'll take him a little bit of time to be able to turn around for home runs.
To support your point, he has what is by far the lowest projection of all the names you just mentioned, which is understandable because he's super young and hasn't played play. You wouldn't expect it to be good. But historically speaking, guys at that level aren't going to play that well. And then that will change, obviously, if he dominates in AAA. Then you would expect him to play better, but not all guys hit the ground running.
Yeah. Think about Oscar Taveras, probably more ready at this point than Walker was. A little bit looser in his swing, a little more raw, but, he had a month and a half. He came up around the All-Star break and, he struggled, really struggled. But they have to struggle in order to know what to improve. So you're going to have to face that at some point with Walker too. So.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on to our last question here as we wind down. We're almost to an hour. I just want to hear from all of you if you have anyone under the radar name that you are looking at that you think could break with the club. Someone that you want to see in particular that we haven't talked about. I realize that competitions might be tight, so you can go a little farther afield, or who are you watching? Who do you want to see take a prominent role, or who do you think could win a roster spot that no one's expecting? And we'll start with Blake because he covers the minors. So we'll start with Blake.
Yeah, I don't know.
Copy him.
I don't know if I'm going to go with a minor leaguer here though, because I think a lot of people have written off Drew Verhagen, and I feel like statistically we all should have. And I know we talked about it earlier, but there was a little interesting piece that came out about him where Dusty Blake wants him to go more four-seamer and less two-seamer. Which is interesting because the sinker actually played better last year. But if you look at it, he does have the traits to have a good four-seamer. He has the above-average 95-mile-per-hour velocity heater, and he has a like 80 something percentile spin rate on it. The problem is he just doesn't get the active spin, which is the percent of spin that actually like creates the movement. So if that's what Dusty Blake is honing in on, and he can get him more of that rising fastball, I think that could honestly become a weapon for him. And to use a popular Jim Edmonds quote, I think he does try to do too much on the mound. He throws like a bajillion pitches, and honestly, some of them aren't even that good. Like if he just stuck with a fastball and his slider, which is his best pitch, and then he pretty much uses that against righties, give him like a curveball or a changeup, which he throws as his lefty weapon, and just go fastball, slider, and whatever that third pitch is, and just drop the rest of them. I could see him making that improvement. And again, like I think the Cardinals are not going to try to cut bait with him yet. So I wouldn't be shocked if he had a month on the roster and then either sucked and was cut or was good and then kept going. But I still see the potential there, and I think the Cardinals might give him a chance.
Yeah, I really like that answer. I wish I had thought of it. I'm going with that one. I really like, because I couldn't think of any. We kind of talked about all the different competitions and stuff, and I couldn't really think of any under the radar because we talked about them and thus they are on the radar. So I like that one a lot.
Yeah. Do you have someone that you've got high expectations for then, Heather? Someone that is already on the radar, but you've got high expectations for him.
Well, I really want to see Jordan Walker a lot. I want to see with my own eyes him in the outfield particularly, and him running the bases. Because there's some talk about his base running, and I do remember him saying himself when people asked him about his base running, he's like, "Do you guys really want to know about that?" So he kind of acknowledges, yeah, based on that reaction, I was like, okay, so he's like not that great at base running. But he does say like maybe the speed isn't there. But he tries to be kind of crafty and catch people off guard. So he tries to be a smart base runner, which I think is important. But those are the things I really would like to see with my own eyes, because unless you have MILB TV, which I could get, but unless you have that, it's really hard to see these players. So I'm excited to get some first looks at the youngsters. I really want to see Tink Hence too, because he hasn't had much pitch, like many innings at all. I think 59 or something like that in Double A or Single A. I don't think he's been in Double A yet. Yeah, so that is someone I would love to see, because apparently he is just electric out there with what he was doing in Single A. I want to see what that looks like in some real competition.
By the way, if you're getting MLB TV, you'll get some MILB TV this year. I don't know if you get that through.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Hopefully, T-Mobile does the promotion again, because that's not how I get MLB TV. But I guess I've already answered it sort of with one of the lefties who isn't Zach Thompson is going to be the under the radar guy who ends up making the team. I don't know if that's Jojo Romero, Anthony M, or what's the other guy? Pecky Naughton. One of those three. And then another guy who I don't think has any shot whatsoever of making the team, but who could emerge as a guy who will be called up soon is Ryan Lotus, because he advanced so quickly through the system last year. Still only 24. And it just reminds me of what they did with Cody Whitley. And that means he's on the radar if they're promoting him that quickly at each level. And he held his own at each level too. So that would be the guy who I'm looking for to see how his stats do in spring. But I don't think he has any shot at making a team.
You know who else I'd like to see is Paul DeYoung, just because there's been a lot into how he's changed his swing. And I don't really know if that's going to help him or not at this point. But I would like to see it, and I have seen the videos and stuff, and they've changed it. His swing is different now, and it does sound like he's put a lot of work in. So I would like for things to go well for him. That's someone I'm interested in seeing, just to see if that makes any difference or not. I'm curious.
Yeah. Mine's not like super under the radar, but the two things that I really got my eye on. One is I want to see Carlson healthy. I don't think we saw much of that last year, at least with the power. And I really do think that this could be the year that he takes a step forward in some of the other parts of his game that we saw in the minors, but haven't quite seen at his highest level, like walk rate. And Carlson playing center, walking 12% of the time with 430 to 460 slugging percentage. That's a really good player. So I want to see a little bit of that from Carlson. But honestly, my under the radar guy is Alec Burleson. It would not shock me even a little bit if Alec Burleson left spring training as the starting left fielder. He just needed a little bit more luck on batted balls last year, and his peripheral stats would have been there. I'd like to see, there's a couple of flaws. I'd like to see him walk more,
Who's
but do what?
Who's he starting over?
O'Neill. Yeah, it's going to take an injury. I don't think he can beat O'Neill out like straight up, right? But a hamstring. I'm not saying I don't want this to happen, right? But typically in the spring something happens, and if there is a path, I could just see Burleson grabbing some playing time and running with it a little bit. I don't have a way for that to happen, but I could see it. Hopefully it wouldn't be something like terrible, like Paul Goldschmidt gets hurt and Alec Burleson finds himself starting at first base or something terrible like that. Could be DH. Could be DH too. He could push Juan Yepez, backwards a little bit, but that's my guy. Carlson, a few little things, and then Burleson, I think could make a name for himself this year and do some new bar like things. So, all right, anything else from you guys? Well, coming up on the podcast, I won't say any names because we don't have anything lined up, but for our next round of guests, we're hoping to bring some names that you will know. Not saying anyone, but maybe Katie Wu. Not mentioning any names, but we're hoping Jim Hayes, if you're listening to this, we're hoping that you might be able to make it in. And then maybe some former Birdos as well, like, I don't know, not to mention any names, but Ben Clemens. Maybe we could get Ben from Fangraphs back. So who knows whether any of those things will happen, but we're going to shoot for some of them over our next few broadcasts. And then we'll have our season preview because the season is coming soon. So for Heather and for Gabe and for Blake, glad you guys joined us today, and have a very happy weekend. Viva El Birdos. We'll see you again soon.